All right, y'all. We're getting down towards the bottom line here. Getting pretty far in. Number one, finally rolled number one, Dimension W. Well, this was a show that I had considered dropping already, but I just wanted to give at least a little bit more of a shot. So let's see what a little bit more of a shot looks like. Apologies for the computer fan noise that you might be hearing, but I'm rendering part 2 of this right now. Anyway, I just watched episode 3 of Dimension W, and I'm not really interested in continuing with it, but I wanted to talk about why, because it's kind of an odd reason, but one that I hope you will understand, or I can make you understand, which is that this show feels like an imitation. Not of anything specific, but it's kind of like imitation gold, or like a fake, just a fake version of something that kind of looks like the real thing, but doesn't have the same value as the real thing. And this is kind of a nebulous feeling, and having only seen 3 episodes, I don't really know where the show goes from there. Although from what I've heard about it, no one really seems all that enthusiastic about the show. I have never seen anyone considering it something great or advising me to watch it. So I don't expect it to really change too much. But there's sort of this aesthetic that exists in all mediums, but especially in like comics and anime and manga and stuff like that, which is like the sort of badass driven plot where like everything is about having the main characters who are these like cool people who are a part of some kind of weird, somewhat imaginative story that takes place in a dark city where dark things are happening, and they might be gangsters or hitmen or rebels or something like that. But it's always like the main character is some kind of badass with some kind of superpower, and he has some kind of job that requires him to fight lots of dudes, or to go undercover and to do random odd jobs, usually for some kind of mafia-like entity. A show that falls into this formula from last year would have been Gangsta, where that show was about, like mob wars and like these main characters who are like basically odd jobs hitmen who, they both have superpowers and they have to get into fights, but most of their existence is looking cool. And that show definitely was like playing into that genre super hardcore, but it just wasn't that good in terms of like having a good story, at least in the anime. From what I understand, the anime had a lot of weaknesses that made it worse than the manga. But like Dimension W is a little more of a sci-fi thing, but it very much has the main character is like supposed to be the badass guy. He's living in a world where there's advanced technology all around him, but he hates that technology, and he's such a badass that he can fight using conventional tools and like not having to use all the modern technology, but he's still cool enough to fight anyways. And he works for like this sort of shady organization with a little bit of a mob vibe. But this show, rather than going for like a dark tone, like a lot of its contemporaries would, where there's not as much like violence and gore in this one. It's more going for a lighthearted and sort of cutesy vibe, because there's also this cute girl character who's like the secondary protagonist. And I think that both as a like hard, cool badasses in a dark city with a sci-fi twist show, and as a show that has a cute girl, it feels incredibly fake. It feels like it has all the surface elements of those stories without appreciating what makes them work. The main character is not likable. He's not interesting. He kind of comes off as like a dumb weirdo. Like the fact that he doesn't use the futuristic technology just makes him seem like a closed-minded, old-fashioned idiot as opposed to a badass. And like, and his personality is just that he's a grumbly old fart, basically. He comes off as like a really old man. I don't think he's probably that old, but he comes off really old just because he's so closed-minded about things. And the organization he's working for, it's not even really clear if they're like good guys or bad guys or what exactly their goals are. They're kind of just it's just like the idea of him working for a kind of shady organization that's at odds with the ruling class, or the ruling people who own the society. like, that idea is there, but there's no personality to what the group actually is, other than that it's, you know, a shady group. And he's kind of a shady guy. And, you know, he's got, like, a rival, like a guy who used to be his friend, but now he's on the opposite side. He works for the government kind of thing. And, of course, whereas the main character's got black hair and dresses in a red outfit, that guy has blonde hair and dresses in a blue and white outfit because, you know, sole bad guy in Kaikisuke. Like, it's the traditional, like, badass guys on opposite sides, like, look. And I feel like every aspect of this show is trying very hard to look like a show like Darker Than Black, which is from the same, like, I believe, designer, or at least the same manga. Like, the guy who wrote the manga that Dimension W is based on, but I also think the show is like a simultaneous release with the manga. I don't know. It's confusing, but some of the people who worked on Darker Than Black also worked on this show, and aesthetically you can kind of tell that it has, like, similarities to that. But that show had such a strong, like, dark city, dark tone, dark gangster shit happening here, you know, like ironic plot twists at the end of each arc and stuff like that, you know, characters falling into these dark scenarios while also keeping up a sort of fun, brisk, action-packed feeling. And this show doesn't have anything. Like, it takes place in a dark city, kind of. Like, it takes place in a metropolis, but the metropolis has no personality. The technology has no personality. It's just these coils that make everything work, you know? There's one character who looks like a persona for some reason, and he's such an aesthetic character. Like, he's obviously there to look cool, but he's not cool, you know? Nothing that's happening is cool. Nothing is interesting. None of it makes me want to continue. And the girl is what pisses me off the most, because I love cute girls. This is no secret. I'm not hard to win over, but I think that most shows go about creating a cute character by making them cute in a certain way. Like, let's say Yui from K-On! She's cute because she's like an airheaded ditz, and she has a very strong, recognizable personality. The girl in Dimension W's personality is that she's cute, and that's it. And it feels so forced. It's really hard to watch. Like, first of all, I hate her voice, because her voice is just like flat and has no personality. It just sounds like she's trying to sound cute. It sounds like an actress trying to create the sensation of cute voice, but it's very annoying. And, like, her design is kind of cute, but, like, it's over-designed, where she has, like, this two-tone hair and this weird style with, like a robot visor things, and then she's got, like, a tail, and it'll always show her, like, she's wagging her tail, or she's rolling around, she's doing something cute, but none of it reflects a personality, where, like, if you're watching a cute girls doing cute things type show, like, let's say K-On! Once again. Let's say that everyone in K-On! Enters, like, they're all on vacation, and they enter a room that they're going to be sleeping in. Ritsu would probably, or Yui, would probably jump onto the floor and start rolling around, because that fits their personality. It fits the way that they're cute. This girl does that in episode 3, but it doesn't feel like it's indicative of anything, because she has no personality. You know, one minute she can be, like, goofy and acting cute, and then the next minute she can be kind of, like, serious or whatever. None of it is consistent. It's all just, here's things that we know look cute, so let's have her do those cute things, you know? And it feels like it's trying to shove her down my throat. There's a line, I mentioned this in the Weebcast when we first started, you know, when the show first started, that there's a line in episode 2 where she, like, puts on a cute outfit, and the camera, like, shows her in all these different poses, and it's like, she literally says, "Aren't I cute?" And I was like, a little, I guess, you know, like, not enough to prop up this whole fucking show, to have the entire ED dedicated to showing you trying to look cute. She's alright, you know, but her personality is non-existent. And that's just how this whole show feels to me. It feels like the show has no personality. It wants to look cool. It's like, hey, check it out. We're like Darker Than Black. We're like a... I don't know if any of you know the Salad Man skit from from the Eric Andre show, where he busts out of a salad booth at a restaurant. He's like, "I'm Salad Man. I'm like a lettuce sort of salad kind of guy. I'm whatever. I can be whatever." Like, that's the whole skit. That's how the show feels to me. Hey, I'm Dimension W, I'm like a dark urban kind of thing. I'm like a hey, but whatever, you know. And I think of Darker Than Black and how that show had Yin, the like silver-haired girl, who people loved that character. And she's like survived over the years, like a character people adored. She barely had any dialogue in Darker Than Black. She never felt like forced down your throat. She was just cute in a very specific way that made it so people were like attached to her. And then this girl in this show feels like she's trying to be this meme character, this, you're all gonna love me, I'm gonna be on 4chan forever, and she just doesn't land. She completely doesn't stick the landing. Anyway, that's too much to talk about a show that I dropped in 3 episodes, but I just thought it was interesting to see a show that was like that and just be, like, confronted with that sort of weird, fake feeling. I just looked and realized I never actually removed Tabimachi Late Show from this list, and now I'm concerned about whether or not I accidentally removed something else instead. I think I'm gonna have to look through my footage and find out if that happened. I'm not sure. Alright, I realized that what happened was that my power went out earlier, and I guess I hadn't saved this document since deleting Tabimachi Late Show from the list. So that's why it was still in there as a zombie. But now it's been removed, and we're gonna generate again. Number 4, that's Nijiiro Days. That's a very short episode type show. So, and also one I wasn't sure about. I only watched the first episode and it was okay, so we'll see what happens. Okay, obviously it's been like a week since I last recorded a clip, and I've shaved since then, but anyway, I took like a week between watching episodes 2 and 3 of Nijiiro Days, because I think it's a solid show, and a big part of me wanted to watch all of it, but also a big part of me has no excitement whatsoever for doing so. And so, like, that, I think that's probably why I put it on hold for so long, before finally watching episode 3 and deciding I could just drop it. Nijiiro Days is interesting because it's basically just a shoujo-ish, like, rom-com slice-of-life show. It really just feels like it feels like a typical, like, very lighthearted rom-com, except that it's all from the perspective of the male characters. And the main guys are just, like, 4 pretty boys who look like they've walked out of any other, pretty boy show. But what makes this show unique in that world is that the guys are just, like, 4 regular straight dudes who, like, act kind of just like real people. I mean, their personalities are very anime, but like in most of the like Fujoshi shows that I've seen, most of the like shows about a bunch of attractive guys, they really play up the like these are all hot men kind of angle, and there's always a lot of like either they all are gay or they all just act very effeminate. And they're always just perfect. Like, every guy is just perfect. They've each got their, like, special cute guy personality, and they just play that to a T and don't feel like real characters or real people. And what's cool about this show, Nijiiro Days, is that the 4 guys just seem like they act like actual friends. They act like just 4 guys, who just happen to all be really exceptionally beautiful. So I found that entertaining in the early episodes, and as I am a fan of the, anime rom-com genre, I was like, cool, it's neat to get one that's like, that basically just feels like a shoujo rom-com, except it's from the guy's perspective instead of the girl's. But the thing about it is that there's also nothing exceptional about it. Like, it's refreshing that it has a slightly different angle on both the rom-com genre and the cute guys genre, but as far as actually being a rom-com show and being a slice-of-life show, it's just very mundane. It's very, like, it's down to earth, but the characters aren't really memorable or interesting. They are just kind of, like, they're pleasant, but there's nothing about them that makes me want to watch these characters, and nothing about the story that makes me want to watch it. It really is pretty generic. So, on the one hand, it's like, it's cool that there's a show that's, like, just decent and pleasant, and if you have wanted a show like that, like, if if you're into cute guy shows and you've always wanted one where the guys act like normal guys and not like these weird sex symbol gods type thing, I feel like every other show about a bunch of hot guys is an idol show, even if it's not actually an idol show. Like, they always act like idols, whereas this show's different. But I wouldn't recommend it like as a good rom-com show just because it's so generic and so unmemorable. The episodes are only 12 minutes long, but it is 26 episodes long, so I just don't have the energy to go through the whole thing. I mean, it's cute, it's fun, it's fine, but I would rather be watching something else. I'd rather even be rewatching, one of my favorite shows in the genre, rather than watching all 26 episodes of something that's just kind of lukewarm. So yeah, that's the end of that one. All right, y'all, we're really in the final stretch here. What is going to be the first of the last 5? Number 4, Kiznaiver. My God. This whole time I've been wondering, because, the 2 shows I was most excited about watching at the start of this were Kiznaiver and Luluco. And then the 2 sequels, Durarara and Shirayukihime, I was like, I don't know if I was concerned or whatever, but I was like, I don't want to start off watching a bunch of sequels and stuff. And it just so happens that all of those shows were the last ones to get clicked on. I really thought I was going to end up getting Haruchika, even though it's a 1 in 5 chance. I was sure that was going to happen. But it looks like we're finally going to watch Kiznaiver. So yeah, let's do that. Okay, obviously I once again left a huge amount of time before watching the next show, and my beard hilariously has gone through every phase of creation in the process of making this video. But I just watched Kiznaiver, and I thought it was pretty great. It had a really fun concept and really cool presentation, and I dug it a lot. I do think it runs into some problems, especially near the end, but I'll get into that in a second. So this show basically is like The Breakfast Club as told through the lens of Cabin in the Woods. The way I felt about this was that it's almost a meta show. Like, the idea of it is, like, someone took a look at how there's a movie like Breakfast Club and shows that are like all these high school dramas where characters, learn from each other and better themselves as people through the bonds that they share by being trapped together in an experience in high school. And they said, what if we made it so there's like a government program forcing these kids to bond for the sake of like learning about it so they can use it on the world? It's like in real life, you watch a movie like The Breakfast Club and it makes you feel like you've learned something about different perspectives and about the world. And this is like if someone, instead of that happening naturally, they were trying to force that to happen so that they could teach the world about empathy. That's like what the plot of this show is, which I found really interesting and hilarious. And a lot of the ways that it subverts the cliches of the genre is through that sort of meta self-awareness, where you've got the childhood friend character who's in love with the main guy, and this is obvious to everyone. And so in episode 2, she has to admit that, early on. And it's just something everyone kind of has to deal with over the course of the show. So, stuff that in a normal series of this type, the whole thing would be building up to these people figuring these things out. In this show, that all has to be spelled out and writ large. And it's really weird, because it almost feels like a parody at times, where, the show seems to take place in a universe where just no one understands the concept of empathy, or that just the characters are so hard-headed and they so just don't understand people that they need to have these things explicitly spelled out to them. They don't understand their own feelings. Stuff that is meant to be implicitly understood is confusing to them. In a way, it's like an entire show about autism. No one understands emotions and they have to have it explained so that they can understand one another, which is kind of hilarious. And the way the show handles that is very funny, and it's all done with this very fun, sort of witty, writing. I think I personally think Mari Okada is a very strong writer. I know a lot of people shit on her for the melodrama of all her shows. Everything she writes is melodramatic. But it's also always very clever. She's great at writing just jokes, like just funny characters who say funny things and get into funny scenarios. She's great at having funny stuff happen during dramatic scenarios, like and bringing the scenes to life through the comedy of what's happening, where characters are just like kind of insulting each other and taking jabs back and forth, and like just the situations are naturally funny as they play out, and it makes it really entertaining and endearing to watch these characters whom, like, in terms of their personalities, they're all cliches on purpose. The show, like in the first episode, the Sonozaki girl like lists off that each of these characters that she's grouping together, each of them is meant to represent a cliche. That's why they chose them for the project. But whereas their personalities are cliches, the way that they interact with each other is unique, and the way that the writing is handled is unique. So it doesn't feel like you're just watching any other show. It feels like you're watching a show with its own distinct personality, and every character has a very strong voice that goes beyond just the cliche that they represent. And, I just thought it was really strongly written in terms of characterization and dialogue. The actual plot, the thing is that what I was afraid this show was going to be was something that took itself very seriously, and that was going to have lots of dialogue that doesn't really mean anything. Because when you start describing emotions and things like connections and wounds and stuff like that, and stuff that has like kind of nebulous definitions, what you quickly run into is the trap of something that is nebulous being defined and like having an effect. Like, for instance, if I said, the scars in my soul are what make me who I am. It's like, well, what does that even really mean? Like, what is a scar in your soul? It's such a nebulous concept that trying to like make it affect a storyline makes the storyline confusing. And I was worried that this show was going to be a lot of that. And towards the end, it is a lot of that. Now, I think the road getting there was so, like for the early part of the show, that's kind of the joke. That they're taking something as nebulous as feelings and sharing pain and making it very literal. And, like, it's this wacky, weird, over-the-top drama where, like, as opposed to the characters feel these things and are in these scenarios because they're just a bunch of teenagers, it's like a government force is putting them into scenarios like this, like literally trapping them in a room and being like, no one's leaving this room until you all get emotional, and I think that is hilarious and that works really well. Towards the end of the series, it gets more into like the weird, heady stuff that doesn't really make sense, where like they're like trying to discern the difference between what is a real wound and what is one that is felt because of a technology thing. It's all weird and confusing. It's like the show tries to be dramatic about its own weird bullshit made up technology, and I don't think that works. Now, I do think that even in the last episodes, the personalities of the characters are so strong, and just, wanting to see the whole narrative wrap up was enough to make me, entertained. But all the like back and forth between the characters about like what real feelings are and stuff like that, totally meaningless and impossible to relate to. But I love the idea of like a government program about trying to foster empathy and trying to create world peace by making everyone empathize with each other. Because I do think that that's like pretty obviously basically what has to happen, but the idea of doing it not by just teaching people like here's what it's like to care about others. Instead, they have to like invent a technology that forces people to literally feel each other's wounds in the hope that that will make them empathize with each other. Like, it's almost a satire in that regard. And I think in the early part of the show, it actually does feel like a satire. And then it just kind of, anime tends to do this. Anime tends to start off as a parody and then to take itself seriously so that it can have a dramatic ending. You get this in almost everything. Everything that doesn't manage to pull off just being a comedy through the end. I think a show that did this perfectly was Sakamoto, where in Sakamoto it gets dramatic and it gets like deep and meaningful, but it always is silly. It never stops being silly. It never stops undercutting itself. And even in the end, everything made sense. Like, all the drama was still applicable to the real world. Whereas towards the end of Kiznaiver, the drama was something that was like made up bullshit drama. It's drama about stuff that could never happen in our world. So it's not relatable anymore. And I think that's kind of where it lost me. So even though I'd still give this show like a strong 7 to a light 8, if I was going to like compare it to something like Sakamoto, I think that show did the same kind of thing better. Even though this show had, stronger elements in that the characters are very memorable and the artwork is fucking incredible. All of the character designs are top notch. The show has some of the best character designs I've ever seen, and they're always beautiful. Every single scene, they're beautiful. All of the animation is incredible. It's a show that, kind of like how Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress felt in its first half, it's like the character designs are so good that when they move with the amount of character that they do, it's like you can't believe it's happening. Like, how can they be animating characters who look this good? And this show's better looking than Kabaneri. Like, because the animation is so expressive, like, it's very much a Trigger show. It's very much from the people who brought you stuff like Little Witch Academia and Kill La Kill, where like every single movement that the characters do has personality, and there's like very cartoony facial expressions and cartoony movements and, exaggerated scenes that all bring the show to life in a way that, like, that was what, from the very beginning, made it like, oh, this isn't going to be what I'm afraid it's going to be. There's so much of, like, when you look at it on paper, it sounds very, like, edgy and overdramatic because it's a show about characters sharing pain through a system that looks like a scar on their wrist, like literally like they've been cutting themselves, is what the technology looks like. And you've got all these beautiful sort of character designs that all look very, they look like dramatic characters. But then when you watch the show, and everyone's cracking jokes all the time, and the situations are so over the top and hilarious, and there's all these, like, stuffed animals walking around beating people up and kidnapping them, and then, the characters are animating with that goofy, exaggerated style, then suddenly all of those elements, the scars on the wrist, suddenly that's hilarious. Suddenly that's like they were pumping it up to look as dramatic as possible for comedic effect. And, like, I really felt like that came through to me. It felt funny. It felt fun. Even in the last episodes when everything is dramatic and stupid, there's still so many funny moments sprinkled in that give the show that special something. And, because of all that, I really enjoyed it. I still think it could have... I would have... If I wrote this show, or if I could edit this show, I would cut out a lot of the stuff that happens after, like... There's kind of a moment where there's the big dramatic climax emotionally with all the main characters. And that felt like, if they went from there and had the arc of the main characters realizing that they've been friends all along, which is like peppered in with this other arc about the characters who haven't really been explored, which introduces all these new concepts that are not as interesting. And so, like, I feel like putting the focus on that as opposed to putting the focus on the characters we already care about and the narrative we're already invested in is what makes the last few episodes just feel weird and, like, broken. But it never stops being entertaining and beautiful to look at. So, overall, still feel like Trigger has never failed me. And, so I can't wait to see Luluco, for that matter. Alright, y'all, we're getting down to the wire. There's only 4 shows left on my short show list. Then in the next video, we'll be expanding this one. So let's see what we get. It's a 4, Luluco. Finally, we're going to watch Space Patrol Luluco. Alright. I have special plans for this one. So, a little while back, I opened up a P.O. box. And the first things that I got in that P.O. box were 2 things of this Australian snack called Tim Tams, which were shipped from Australia to my house, as well as a letter which was full of references to Space Patrol Luluco. I didn't get the references at the time. I didn't know what Tim Tams were. So in my comments, I got a bunch of people, first of all, instructing me on something called a Tim Tam Slam, which is a certain technique for eating Tim Tams, as well as a bunch of people criticizing me for not having watched Luluco yet. And I had multiple comments saying, you should do a video of you watching Luluco and eating Tim Tams. And I thought, that's a great idea. That was also a long time ago. I ate both trays of Tim Tams, and I filmed a Tim Tam Slam video back when I had the beard. Here's that. Hey everybody, so after my mail video, I was shamed for not getting a reference to Space Patrol Luluco, and also for never having heard of Tim Tams and the Tim Tam Slam, which is apparently a thing where you bite off the ends of a Tim Tam and then use it as a straw to drink a hot drink, and then as the drink permeates the cracker, slam it into your mouth and eat it. Now, I don't really drink hot drinks ever, so I went out to Starbucks and got a caramel macchiato because it sounded like something that would be good with a Tim Tam. Still pretty hot. Now I'm hopefully hope I can figure out how to do this. I don't get how this makes a straw. I don't get how this is gonna work. It's okay, Brandon. I'll live through this.
I know, it's fine.
Okay. That made more sense than I expected. Do you want to try, Brandon?
Very good.
And then I found out that you can get Tim Tams in the US quite easily at Target. Here's a clip of me doing that. So, it's Trevor, who works at Target, informed me that you can just get Tim Tams at Target. They got them right here. But it's called a cookie in America. So, for all this time, I've had these Tim Tams sitting around in my room, me not eating them, just holding off, staring at them longingly. I've been on a diet for most of the past month, so I've been definitely not trying to eat these. All so that when I finally rolled Luluco on my fucking randomizer, because I refused to watch it before it came up in the random list, I finally rolled it, so now it's time to eat these Tim Tams and watch Space Patrol Luluco.
銀河支店宇宙移民特区荻窪のどこにでもいる超普通な現役女子中学生のはずだったんだけど、今は訳あって宇宙パトロール荻窪支部の普通じゃない人たちに囲まれて普通じゃない毎日を送っている。それが嫌かっていうと、そうでも。The truth is, I just got done filling up at lunch right before I started watching Luluco, and the prospect of eating more than even one of those Tim Tams is making my stomach scream at me. Maybe I'll just eat one per season, because, you know, Luluco's divided into, like, 4 seasons, even though it's only 12 episodes long. This party's gotten crazy! Okay, so I just watched the rest of Space Patrol Luluco, and I gotta say, I ended up really enjoying it. More so than I thought I was going to in the early episodes. At first I thought it was just kind of a cute, fun little show. I love the character designs and the aesthetic, but there wasn't really that much going on in the story, and it seemed like that was kind of intentional. Like, it wasn't trying to be something super big or elaborate. It was just a cute little 7-minute episodes, 13 episodes show. And so I didn't have much in the way of expectations, and I just thought it was kind of dumb, but fun. Kind of a surprising little happens in a lot of the episodes. Like, compared to something like Tonkatsu DJ Agetaro or Oshiete Galko-chan, which were 2 other 7-minute episode shows I enjoyed this year, those ones felt like they had more going on than this one did for a long time. But then, the last 4 episodes really flipped all of that on its head and gave me a lot to think about and were a ton of fun and had some really interesting themes that sort of made it feel like a proper Trigger and Hiroyuki Imaishi show. Now, for those who don't know, Hiroyuki Imaishi, the director of the show, is my favorite anime director. He directed Gurren Lagann and Kill La Kill and Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt, among a few other things. And I just absolutely love his style. I love the themes that tend to crop up in his work. I love just the way he seems to view the world really resonates with me. And he's done a lot of work that is not as deep as his mainline content. And I often attribute, like, a lot of the deeper themes of Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill to Kazuki Nakashima, the writer, who is a fantastic writer. But it's also clear from all of Imaishi's work that there's certain stuff that he keeps returning to. And Luluco definitely returns to those things, especially in the later episodes. Particularly this idea of, like, taking highbrow concepts and lowbrow concepts and sort of fusing them together and suggesting that there's no difference between them, or that the simplest things in the world and the stupidest things in the world can be the most important or the most powerful. And that's a very common theme that he seems intent on exploring. I wrote a video about Space Dandy and Kill la Kill called Embracing the Inquantifiable, or the Unibrow, in which I explained the idea of uniting high and lowbrow things into one unibrow concept. And this show is, like, about that. Like, the whole idea of the show is that it's about a middle schooler's first love, which, according to the villain in the series, is the most worthless thing in the world. The stupidest, most worthless, most basic thing that doesn't matter to anyone because it's so flighty and fleeting and hollow. But then this show suggests that that thing can also be the most powerful thing in the universe because it is so strongly felt, and because it is, you know, it's something that a person is feeling more powerfully than anyone else will ever feel anything, to the extent that the entire universe is really about that. And, yeah, it goes big and epic towards the end. I mean, arguably, it's bigger than Gurren Lagann, because this one crosses multiple dimensions. You know, Gurren Lagann was the size of the universe, but Luluco's power goes across dimensions. So, technically, she might be stronger than Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. But this show is just chock full of references to everything Imaishi has ever worked on, which, as a huge fan of his work, I greatly appreciate. There's a whole midsection of the show, like episodes 7, 8, and 9, which are, like, literally going through the universes of other Trigger shows. So there's one episode that's all about Kill la Kill references, one is all Little Witch Academia references, and one is references to sex and violence with Mach Speed, which was a part of the Studio Khara animation shorts thing that Trigger did with Imaishi directing. So there's some parts that are just nothing but references to that. Inferno Cop is in this show, and he has a big dramatic appearance, and someone who looks exactly like him is the leader of the Justice Patrol, the Space Patrol, and they all do the Justice thing, which this is the reference I didn't get in the letter I got. But there's also lots of visual references to Gurren Lagann and Die Buster and, like, everything, all the old Gainax stuff, which is less blatant because obviously Trigger doesn't necessarily have the rights to those things. But there's, you know, one part where they do the panning shot of Luluco standing cross-armed on the front of the ship like Simon from episode 1 of Gurren Lagann, and they do the exact same shot. She runs up a villain's arm that in a way that almost perfectly parallels Imaishi's animation from episode 1 of Die Buster. So, you know, there's even some FLCL stuff where when Luluco transforms into her final form, it looks exactly like the cuts from the last episodes of FLCL. So, huge references to all the old Gainax shit that Imaishi worked on. And all of that, you know, I appreciate a lot. Not that it necessarily automatically makes the show better, but, like, for me, it's like, oh, hey, it's that thing. And then for the story to eventually feel like it's an accumulation of all the ideas Imaishi has presented before. Very obvious panty and stocking references in the way that the villain is revealed, because there's, like, a betrayal that's almost exactly the same as Stocking's betrayal at the end of Panty and Stocking. So, like, it feels like an accumulation of everything Imaishi has done, and there's a lot of reference to the fact that it's a show by Trigger. At the end, Luluco, you know, turns into essentially a Trigger, and they use the phrase Trigger a number of times, and she's even referred to as Trigger-chan towards the end, which is the mascot of Studio Trigger. So yeah, this whole thing is basically Imaishi's love letter to himself, his own work, to everything he's done, just sort of putting it all in one place, and in a way that makes it feel like a mission statement. Like, the message of this show is something that's in everything he's done. the idea of, you know, embracing the dumbest thing in the world and how important that thing really is. And, like, I think that's why this show had to be made. Like, this show is like a key to unlocking the meaning behind everything else he's ever worked on. So yeah, I ended up enjoying it a lot. It gave me a lot to think about, particularly towards the end. And I mean, the whole show is fun. It's never, like, bad. I just thought that it, you know, jumped up so much in interest towards the end, and, you know, had lots of badass scenes and cool moments. The music is great. Both the opening theme and ending theme, the ending theme especially, is just, it's tight. I love it. So, yeah, highly recommended. And now I'm going to move on to the last 3 shows.
Okay, we're almost there. Number 2, Shirayukihime Season 2. Alrighty. I'm on a roll tonight, just finished Season 2 of Akagami no Shirayukihime, and it was a good time. It was pretty much exactly like Season 1, which is pretty much what I expected. My impressions of it are exactly the same. It's extremely pleasant and cute and just enjoyable to watch. Very comfy little romantic series that's very likable and unbelievably pretty. I don't understand how the visuals in this show are as beautiful as they are. Just the color design is so incredible, and the animation, especially when they get into fight scenes, is phenomenal, with, of course, excellent fight direction courtesy of Masahiro Ando, who is pretty much the best director around for fight scenes, which is why it's interesting that he even is on a show like this when most of what he does is more action-focused, but when this show has action, damn, it is good. And it turns out he can also just make something that's just pleasant and pretty. He can do romance. The man can do anything. Now, my biggest complaint about Shirayukihime Season 2 is the same as it was for the first season as well, which is that it is unbelievably slow, and it just has so many unnecessary details, which, I mean, ordinarily, I like lots of detail. I like when I get to, like, know the characters better and spend more time with them, but this show doesn't have a lot of unique details. It just, like, it takes every single possible step of the way of, like, showing you an event happening. Like, for instance, Shirayuki gets called, well, not called, she gets a letter from the prince of her home country that she has to go over there and, like, meet with the prince. And there's, like, nearly an episode's worth of just, like, going through the process of getting her there, like deciding who's going to accompany her, and then the brother of the prince, like, showing up, and, like, all these different steps that it takes, and every single one of them is shown in full just to get her somewhere. And it's like, some of it, you know, is adding to, like, the drama or adding to the point, but it's just so meticulous that it sometimes comes off as, like, you know, you could get to the point much quicker. I definitely think this show takes its sweet time, and I mean, it's better than if it rushed through all these points, I guess. But there's just not so much going on in this show that it's like, you know, that it feels like every moment of it is worthwhile. But the overall experience, again, is pleasant. And I think that, you know, what takes me through this show is that it kind of features my favorite kind of characters and my favorite kind of chemistry between its characters, which is that I really adore shows where everyone is just good-natured and they're all best friends. Like, that's my favorite type of show, is just watching a bunch of people who are all really nice and good people, and, like, just watching them be good together, you know, or to try and better themselves, or, you know, to deal with hard interpersonal conflict without it being about one of them being an idiot. You know, it's that everyone's good-natured, and that makes it harder to deal with each other in some ways. Like, for instance, the character Obi in this show, who is an attendant to the prince, and very obviously in love with Shirayuki, but he also really loves the prince. And, like, wanting to see the two of them happy is more important to him than him getting to be with Shirayuki, even if it's, you know, it can be painful for him at times to, like, have to wrestle with those feelings. I love that. Rather than a love triangle that's based on characters not understanding each other, or fucking just miscommunication, or just dumb bullshit, and then having to have all the characters
constantly not understand each other even though I know what's going on. I hate that. I much would rather watch characters who are struggling with the fact that they're all such good friends and that, you know, like there's something to gain from whether they win or lose in the love triangle. Like if Obi was, you know, like if he was actually able to be with Shirayuki, that would be fine, but he stands to gain because he loves the prince as well and he wants to see him happy. So yeah, that's overall what I really enjoy about this show. I like that there's a whole effort to, like this whole season, the main character who has any development is the prince of Shirayuki's home country, who in the first episode was like a sleazeball who was trying to force her into marriage with him because she was pretty. And, you know, he showed up again in season 1 and basically she jumpstarts his character development. And most of season 2 is about this guy becoming a better person and becoming a part of this everyone's good-natured, everyone's likable sort of circle of friends. And, you know, so that was cool. Other than him, no one else really made a lot of progress this season, though. So it did kind of feel like there's this huge arc. Like, most of the season is one big arc, which is lots of, like, action and suspense and some mystery. None of that was that interesting. It was entertaining, but it didn't really do anything for the plot. It kind of felt like a side story. The only thing that really happens is we get to meet, spoilers, we get to meet Shirayuki's father. I know that's, like, I said spoilers, but I figured out that was happening fairly early into the arc. Like, there's enough to hint at it that you should be able to figure out that that's probably what's going on. So yeah, but so even then it kind of felt like it was like holding off this mystery, and then I was like, I've already figured it out. You know, I get where this is going. So, I mean, yeah, again, none of it's bad. I'm not complaining about any of this. I think it's a fine season and a fine show. It's just sort of like, it's very 7 out of 10. 7 strong, light to decent 7, you know, is the way I feel about Shirayuki. Where even though I don't have any complaints about it, it's a little milquetoast, if you will. Like, it doesn't have something that would, like, blow me away. There's nothing in the show that's, like, something I would want to return to. I feel like if they... Like, I don't see myself ever rewatching seasons 1 and 2 of Shirayukihime. If they made a 3rd season, I would keep watching it. But, like, I already feel, now that I've watched season 2, I already feel like I've seen the whole show again. And none of the characters are, like, standout and memorable enough that, like, that they stick out in my mind. Because when I started season 2, like, every time a character showed up on screen, I was like, oh yeah, I think that guy was the one who was like a thing. Like, how did they meet again? Like, I kept trying to remember how everyone was connected and like what their deal was as I was watching the show, because I'd pretty much forgotten like all the individual storylines of season 1. I just kind of remembered what was overall good about it. But anyway, yeah, nonetheless, it's a good show. I would still recommend it, especially if you've been looking for like a nice fantasy romance story with some adventure and some fun while still being just a very cute romance, shoujo-y romance. Well, it is truly down to the wire now. I would have just flipped a coin, but I didn't have any change on me. 1. So we're going to finish off Durarara Season 2. Hopefully I'll understand any of it. So I just got done watching the final season of Durarara Season 2. I know that's confusing, so is the show. And my feelings towards it are, it was good, but I ultimately feel ambivalent about the entire Durarara franchise. Like, Durarara works for me kind of inherently because, like, the themes of the story and what it's trying to do and the style of it are all things that I absolutely love. It kind of comes from a place that is so similar to where I come from and what I appreciate and what, you know, I've tried to create myself, that it's like impossible for me not to appreciate it. If you've seen my video, Everyone is Badass in Durarara, I kind of explained what to me is like the core appeal and sort of the core message of the series, that it's about how sort of everyone has their own story and that, you know, you can put the normal next to the abnormal,
but really it's not that different. Like, no one is just a normal person. Everyone has something that's made them who they are, and all of those stories can be interesting, whether they seem totally out there or not so out there, and people fluctuate between those two things over the course of their lives, and the show really focuses on that and sort of studies that and has a great appreciation for that. And I love the dark urban setting, I love the crazy over-the-top characters, and I spent a considerable amount of time working on a story that I was writing back in the early 2000s or early 2010s that was basically Durarara. Like, because Bakano, which is the predecessor to this, and Black Lagoon and other stories of this nature were such a huge influence on me, the story that I was trying to write was practically identical to what Durarara is. It's like a bunch of superpowered crazy people and normal people and gangsters all in this like anachronistic story and all bouncing off of each other in crazy scenarios. Mine was a little bit more unhinged and had more of a fantasy element to it, but nonetheless, it's like the same thing. So for me, when I watch Durarara, it always takes me back. It always takes me back to like that period of time, and it kind of feels like if I had ever actually, finished what I was working on, this is kind of what it would have been. Every bit as chaotic and probably not as good, but mine wouldn't have been as good. But so because of all that, I find myself drawn to Durarara, and I really think that the first season in particular had a lot going for it in that it introduced all these great characters, and it, first got the audience to care about them, got us to, feel something about this world and the people inhabiting it, and there were some great moments in season 1. Like, the end of the first arc in, episode 12 is, the first time you see it especially, it was, overwhelming that this thing happened. It was such a great, tying all the threads together in one beautiful bow kind of moment. And the problem is that there's nothing like that ever again in the show. It never tops that first moment. And the rest of season 1 is still pretty good. Like, the individual stories, they get less and less impactful and they get more and more convoluted, but they're still interesting and they're still introducing the main characters and what they've got going on. But from season 2, in each part of season 2, I don't think it ever delivers on, oh my god, this moment again. It never has a tight story that comes together and all the parts fit just right and it's great. Instead, it just gets complicated. And to an extent that for a lot of seasons 1 and 2, or, of season 2, for a lot of the first 2 parts, it was just confusing. There were parts where I just had no idea what was going on, because they were introducing so many new factions and new characters, and everyone had their own thing going on. And then with part 3, it kind of felt like most of that didn't matter, because everything just kind of converges to a point. All of season 3 is just getting all the characters into a few easily defined groups and sort of heading towards the big climax and putting everyone in a position so that there could be a proper ending to this thing. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that there is an ending, that this story could actually, have something where everything comes together and it all makes sense and it resolves, more or less resolves the major conflicts of the show. But it's why did it take us such a winding path to get here? Most of what those things happened, they didn't really matter that much. Most of the characters just kind of get swept up in the final season, and it just felt like it was just barreling towards the end, okay, we got it, let's finish this thing, this is getting too ridiculous, let's just do it. So, a lot of the elements that were set up, especially in part 2, didn't feel like they had much of a payoff. It just kind of felt like they fizzled out. Isaiah having his whole group that he forms at the end of part 2, that did not amount to much in part 3. So, on the one hand, I can't help myself but to enjoy Durarara. I can't help but to love these characters and to love this setting. And, the new characters that they introduce were mostly fun. I liked pretty much, well, I won't say I liked every new character. Some of the ones that were more minor and just like show up in and out are not that memorable. But there's certain characters who are like the new main-ish characters who I usually liked, and they had good stories and good personalities. But the actual overarching thing that was happening, it just was not interesting. It almost never was interesting in season 2. For me, it was more like sitting back and letting it all wash over me and just enjoying the characters and the dialogue and the themes as they present themselves. But I don't think that the themes ever evolved from season 1. I really think that that scene at the end of the first arc, which ends up being called back to a lot throughout season 2, which I didn't expect because this was my favorite line of dialogue in the first season, but it didn't strike me as something that was going to literally be important later, which is where after the main character, Mikado, like sort of, I won't spoil what happens if you haven't seen the show, but he sort of reveals himself to be a certain kind of person. And Izaya says to him, if you want things to stay interesting, you have to constantly evolve. Like, right now, you've stepped into the limelight as something weird and something off, but everything is going to become normal to you eventually. So you have to constantly be doing new things and seeking new reactions. And that was my favorite line in in season 1. But that kind of is the only thing that keeps happening throughout the show. And like it's never about something new. It's always the same. And so even though I appreciate that theme and I still enjoyed watching it all unfold, it didn't have anything, like, I feel like I could just watch season 1 again, and it would give me just as much of the effect as watching season 2, and since the moments are better in season 1, it's easier to rewatch. I really can't see myself sitting through all of season 2 again. I can't see going through the motions of all the crazy, baffling shit that happens, most of which ends up barely mattering. But I appreciate that there was an ending. I appreciate that somehow this because, most light novels, they just go on forever. They just never end. And a story with this many characters, it could have done that. It could have just kept going because you could always find new scenarios to put them in. And, I mean, it's not like the story ends in such a way that it couldn't just keep going if it wanted to. But I appreciate that they at least tried to tie up the main loose ends that were going on and be like, cool, this is it. We don't have to keep going, because clearly there was never going to be something dramatically new to add to the series. But anyways, yeah, it's cool to watch it come to an end after 6 fucking years that it took between seasons 1 and 2 ending. So I guess all that's left now is to watch Haruchika. Alrighty, just got done watching Haruchika, and with that, I've finally finished all of the short anime from this year that I wanted to watch. But before I address that, Haruchika, pretty fun show. I really love the character designs. I like the personalities of the characters. I feel like this show is smart. It's smartly written. It has good dialogue and fun scenes in it. And lots of little moments that are really great. Like just little tiny standout moments and details. However, the problem with Haruchika is that it's not that interesting. It's like it has all of the trappings of something great, but the core storyline, the core like moment to moment what's happening is just not that interesting. And it's funny because I actually really appreciate the way that the story is packaged, sort of. Because, like, essentially, the plot is almost exactly like Hibike Euphonium. It's about a high school brass band who starts off very weak, but their teacher is this, like, super excellent, genius guy who's teaching the class. This guy doesn't have the same personality as the guy from Hibike Euphonium. This guy's actually doesn't seem to really even mind if his club doesn't do all that well, whereas the other guy was taking it very seriously. But it's sort of about them trying to put together this club and make it to the nationals and like compete in the contests later on. But the funny thing about it is that it doesn't focus on that at all. all of that stuff matters to the characters, but the show is not about that. Instead, the show is about a bunch of random episodic mysteries that the characters end up involved with, which they end up solving because of the two main characters, Haruta and Chika. Haruta being a sort of like Sherlock Holmes-esque genius, he just is. He's just got incredible deductive reasoning skills. And Chika is very energetic and just sort of plays a foil to him. And she is the one who will sort of brings people together. And the two of them end up involved in all these mystery scenarios, and they have to solve them. And, like, the individual mysteries, none of them are that interesting. Some of them do have some pretty great endings. Like, I will say that there's certain episodes where when it's revealed what was going on, it's pretty funny or fun, but I wouldn't say it's ever particularly clever. It's never something you would have guessed yourself, or it's never something that when it happens you're like, oh my god, that's what was going on. It's more like I don't really care until the end, and I'm like, oh, alright, well, you know, at least it was something. At least I didn't sit around kind of half attentively for a whole episode just, you know, for it to fizzle on out. Although there are a couple episodes that are kind of like that. It's just weird that the show has like all these pretty strong characters, and all the characters are undergoing an actual story, but the show's not focused on that. It's like, you know, I love slice of life shows. I love shows that are just about a bunch of characters hanging out. The funny thing about this show is that it has great characters with great chemistry together, but it doesn't just focus on them hanging out. It instead tells these other stories that aren't really all that interesting. So it's kind of a weird format, and I like that it went for something like that. I just wish that the individual stories were more interesting, because then I think it could have been a pretty great show. I really like the main characters and the way that they bounce off of each other. I love that it's a girl and a guy who've known each other since childhood, and both of them are in love with their teacher, the same teacher. The guy is actually gay. He's one of the only gay characters in a show that's not about gay men who is actually handled well. Like, he's not flamboyant or weird. None of the characters really draw attention to it. He's just a gay guy who happens to be in the show as one of the main characters. Exceedingly rare in anime. So that's nice to see. I love the dynamic between the two. I love that they're fighting over, you know, who gets Sensei, even though Sensei is totally oblivious to the fact that either of them, you know, feels anything towards him. So, like, that aspect of the show is great. But just, like, moment to moment, not that interesting. So, yeah, it's weird. I wouldn't even say it was necessarily frustrating, because it's not like the show had so much potential that it's like, oh, why are you wasting it on this mystery story? It's more like, just, it was pleasant. It didn't make me mad or anything. I was bored a little more often than I would have liked. And at no point did I think, wow, like, everyone should watch this show. Like, you know, I can't say I'm, like, super glad I watched it, other than in that it's a thing that exists and I know about it now. And I do think the show is maybe, it's, like, slightly underrated, but I can't even say by that much, because, like, I think people were unnecessarily harsh on the show, but at the same time, I don't think I could really defend it in many ways, other than that I do think it's very smartly written. And, like, that's the best thing it has going for it, is that it's cheeky and fun in a good way. But anyways, that's it. That's the last of the shows that I wanted to watch before moving on to my longer show list. So I've actually put together 3 different lists. So there's still to be 3 more videos in this Finish or Fail series, but each of them will probably be a lot shorter than this one. The first one is for longer shows which have already finished airing. The second one is for longer shows which haven't finished airing, which hopefully, you know, as I finish up all the ones that are already done, some of the other ones will complete, or otherwise, I'll just catch up on them so that at least, you know, I'll be ready when they complete and I won't have to watch a bunch of super long shows at the end of the year. And also, I have a list of shows that I might give a second chance to. Those are ones that, like, that either I thought the first episode was okay, but just didn't feel like continuing the show, but then I heard good things about it, so I figure I might as well pick it back up. Or, in one particular case, a show that is so popular that no one will shut up about it, so I have to form an opinion on it by watching it. You all know what I'm talking about. Anyways, see you in the next one.